everyone. Give a couple more minutes for folks to trickle in, but I love to start things off with an icebreaker. I'll start things off with Pete, and then you can popcorn over to Bill. Pete,
hmm
what are you, a morning person or a night owl?
I think I used to be a night owl before my sons showed up, but I have a 4-year-old now, and so it's like enforced morning person. Because like even if you're not a morning person, like congratulations, he's up at 5:30 a.m. being like, "Where's my breakfast?" So de facto morning person now, which is good for email. What about you, Bill?
This is like that question: are you an inbound SDR or an outbound? I too, like Pete, I think I'm an all bound on
Ah,
this. I I'm by nature more of a vampire, meaning I like the nighttime. But
mm,
I spent prior to my current gig 3 years working for a company based in Raleigh, North Carolina. So
there-
when they're 3 hours ahead of you, you start early. So
oh
that
man, yeah.
plus I have a 9 and a 5-year-old boys. So 9 and 5-year-old boys. So I also have an early start that way. So all bound, Angelica, is my answer.
Yeah, I think
Very,
the
very nice.
reality is that you, as a sales leader, you got to be up early and late because either A, you're taking early calls because like you gotta, you just end up like pulling your calendar around like, oh, okay, there's an important deal in like London or whatever. Or B, it's the only time you can get anything done because you're not on calls with your reps. So it's like now I get to clean my inbox or now I get to go into the metrics or whatever.
So true.
That is true. Awesome. Well, all right, let's get started. Today, we're here to talk about Go Coach or Go Home, 3 strategies to drive your reps to more booking, with Pete Kazanji, CRO and co-founder at Atrium, and Bill Bench, revenue operating partner at Battery Ventures. We're so excited about the amazing content you get out of this event. But first, before we dive into the content, today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those who are not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and to help see around corners they may not know about. We do this through live sessions like the one that you're at today, our online forum, our quarterly summits, and our in-person events, which is coming back soon. If you're not already part of MSP, you'll be invited to join after this event. But enough about MSP. Today's session wouldn't be possible without our sponsorship from the team at Atrium and Battery Ventures. Now I'm going to hand it off to Pete and Bill to say a few words about Atrium and Battery. Pete?
Yeah, for sure. Hey everyone, super stoked to be here. Bill and I both have a passion for coaching and improvement, making people better, making organizations better, etc. So I'm pumped about the conversation that we're going to have on that topic because we both have very strong opinions about that. Atrium, my software company, makes what we like to call data-driven sales management software. What that is it's software that's uniquely positioned to help managers, sales managers, so AE, SDR, AM, CSM managers use metrics to improve team performance. That's literally what Atrium exists to do. And so what's kind of cool about Atrium is that it's super easy to set up. You just log in with your Salesforce credentials, and within 5 minutes, Atrium will show you how your reps are performing across a myriad of different different KPIs and essentially do statistical analysis on that, what have you. But the whole idea here is to help managers use data to change rep behavior so the reps and the teams can get better. So that's kind of like our little elevator pitch there. Bill, why don't you pitch us on Battery really quick, pretty please?
Yeah, thanks for the throw, Pete. So I'm Bill, and I am a go-to-market operator of 29 years. And my last couple of companies, probably notable to the audience here, would be Marketo, where I was at for about a decade, and then Pendo for about 3 years. And I made the switch last year over into the venture side, but I'm not an investor. I don't write checks. What I do is I help the organizations that Battery invests in to think about their growth motions, how they expand their TAM, how they think about going through segments, how they grow globally, how they become single product and multi-product companies. And I'm really excited to join you, Pete, again. This is, I think, our third session. And for the audience, what I'll share is one of the reasons I really like saddling up with Pete is because I learn things. I have become a total convert to the whole data-driven concept as a sales manager because it's hard. There's no certifications out there for becoming a sales manager. I heard a CEO of another company make a comment that it's harder to become a certified nail esthetician. It takes more certification to do that than it does to become a sales rep or a sales manager. And so the whole idea of taking the art of sales and sales management and bringing in the science of data is something that I'm a total student of. So hopefully there'll be some good takeaways today for everybody listening in.
Oh yeah, well, and as you can see, this is why Battery, Battery and other kind of like forward-thinking venture funds do a good, like bring that in house. Because like Bill, I imagine you're not free. In fact, I imagine you might be like kind of costly. They bring that in house because like that's a required capability of a modern sales organization, and if you're not doing that, like you're just gonna get your ass kicked by your competitors. So, I think how we see these venture funds putting their money where their mouth is with respect to like folks like Bill and what have you kind of really indicates how important that is. I think we have a little bit of housekeeping here. Is that right, Angelica?
We do. So before we dive into the content, I'm very excited to dive into content, but first let's go over to some housekeeping notes. First, this event is recorded. You'll be able to get the recording and key takeaways on the previous events page on the MSP website. Second, if you have a question for Bill and Pete, please use the Q&A function so they will be sure to get it live during the event today. Now I'll pass it off to Pete to get things started.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much, Angelica. Yeah, I think what I would love maybe just to do really quickly before we kind of get into some of the different topics that we're going to chop up here is to just kind of introduce ourselves. And the reason why is not because like, oh, big deal or whatever, but I think it is important to understand kind of like where we're coming from a background, a sales motion background, et cetera, et cetera. So Bill, age before beauty. I would love for you to maybe share some of the last couple sales leadership roles that you've had, kind of like the segments that you were selling into, the motions, like kind of who the buyers were, just so the audience can kind of be like, oh yeah, like I sell into product management leadership too, and like, man, it drives me batshit as well. Like, after you.
Totally. I'll start here. First 15 years, as I mentioned, 29 years in business. First 15 were big billion-dollar companies like Oracle, PeopleSoft. They were great for training, for providing me frameworks, and preparing me for going to small business. And the last 15 years have been at Marketo, marketing automation vendor that it's interesting. I talk about this a lot. It started as a single product company selling to the US and specifically the SMB segment of the US. And 10 years later, this incredible journey of going from private company to public company to getting bought by a private equity firm, we had grown into a global company with the product translated to 8 languages, focused mostly on the enterprise with a platform of products, meaning things we had organically built or acquired and made into this platform. Just this really amazing journey that I feel privileged to have been able to be a part of and go along with. And I took that experience. I went to Pendo, and Pendo, unlike Marketo, which sold to the marketing buyer, was focused on the product. Really was leveraging, I think, a lot of this was back in 2018. But what a lot of companies were realizing is that DevOps and product teams had never really been focused on as a buyer. They weren't known as software buyers. And I joined Pendo because I really love this whole mission of helping your users, first of all, understanding what your users are doing, but then helping create a better experience inside your application. And that's what Pendo really did as a user analytics and in-app guidance company. So I did a 3-year run there, and same kind of playbook. They started as an SMB organization and had aspirations to become enterprise. And over the years I was there, that's what we focused on, was moving up through those segments.
Yeah, and like I think that, I mean, at the time, the Marketo, the CMO was a buyer of these sort of things, like was buying software, et cetera, et cetera. More of kind of like a move from an on-prem situation with like the legacy marketing automation platforms and what have you to kind of like cloud hosted and what have you. Whereas like the product organization, like they didn't really buy anything like before Pendo. Like the biggest amount of spend was like Jira, and like does that even count for for product? It's more just like self-torture.
Right.
So it sounds like selling to an existing category, kind of scaling that up, et cetera, and then also secondarily like net new category selling, which of course is just like they'll turn you gray. Wonderful. Yeah, and so just a little bit of background on me. I'm Pete Kazanji. I haven't been around the block quite as many times as Bill, working on it. But yeah, so I'm currently the founder and CRO of Atrium, as we kind of noted earlier. But the reason why I kind of got into data-driven sales management, what have you, is because my last software company was a recruiting software company called TalentBin, and TalentBin was it was a startup, and it was something that where I was one of the business generalist founders, and it was my first startup. And what we quickly found was that somebody needed to sell this stuff. It doesn't just sell itself. Weird. So to like a former product marketer, product manager, which was me, that was like news to everyone in the audience right now. It's like, yeah, duh, Pete. Don't forget, this was Pete like 15 years ago. And so quickly, I was like, all right, well, someone's got to sell this stuff, and so I guess I'm going to be that person. And so I was the first AE, our first sales manager, our first sales leader. And what I kind of realized as somebody who's like, kind of a process guy, kind of like, kind of left, like, kind of left brainy, et cetera. I kind of realized it's like, man, this is just like, it's kind of like a factory in here, right? I got my SDRs, I got my AEs, like it's just the machine. And so we did a really good job of like instrumenting the organization, and kind of got to that point of like a really powerfully data-driven sales organization using like a bunch of Google Sheets and like Salesforce reports and like duct tape and whatever, and me like holding it all together with through like Google Meeting, like Google Calendar invites. And so that's kind of like what inspired this idea of like, hey, there's got to be a better way of doing this. I ended up writing a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, that after we sold TalentBin to Monster Worldwide, and then started Atrium as a result. And so the sales organization at TalentBin, so the buyer at TalentBin was a director of talent acquisition, VP of talent acquisition, pretty velocity sale, kind of like 10K ASP, not really much of an expand motion because it's more like focused on the sourcers. Atrium, it's like a two-legged sale where like we're working with sales management, sales leadership, and then also usually sales operations if there are sales operations in the organization. We work with organizations that are anywhere between like 5 and like 300 account executive, or sorry, like size of the sales organization, like SDR plus AE is like between 5 and like 300 there. But yeah, it's like a really fun sales motion. It's still very like high velocity, and so it's data driven. Before we kind of get into the kind of the meat of things here, one of the things that we were kind of talking about is like we're really into really into coaching. It's something that's a very it's a passion of Bill's and mine. And so these are some of the resources that we've really been enjoying recently as as to coaching resources. So couple of books here: 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach by Corey Bray and Hillman Story. Absolutely fantastic, super much love it. A really easy read because it's written as like a parable, like a story, what have you. It's just like page turner. I know that sounds ridiculous, right? And then but it's fantastic. I have all my reps read it so they kind of like can talk better to sales managers. And then Crushing Quota is a little bit more academic. It's written by Michelle Vizana. She was the co-author with Jason Jordan of Cracking the Sales Management Code. Crushing Quota is all about sales coaching and practice, right? How to do a better job as a sales manager, as an SDR manager, what have you. So if you guys want a copy of those books, and a coffee is for coaches, Yeti mug here, we're going to drop the sign up link into the chat there. So just go ahead and you can sign up for those assets there, have a chat with our team, and kind of get that survival kit. Wonderful. So we're gonna talk through a bunch of different kind of topics here. Let's go ahead and kind of like get the party started here. So Bill, when you think about the future state sales coaching, kind of like as compared to the historical state of sales coaching? Like what are the big changes that are gonna be coming around? Like I have opinions, but I'd love to kind of get your perspective on that.
I think as I mentioned earlier, as a fan of the data driven, the scientific side of it, I go back to Marketo. I think what Marketo helped do for marketers was give them a seat at the revenue table. It took this team that was always known as kind of the artsy, group that created
Arts and
napkins.
crafts.
Yeah, the arts and crafts table at your conference, where they made sure that the right font color and font size was on your napkin for your logo, and they banged their fists on the table and swore that I swear, Mr. or Mrs. CFO, Mr. and Mrs. CEO, I am influencing revenue. But there was no way for them.
I promise you.
Yeah, exactly. They promised it, but
Scout's honor.
there was nothing scientific, nothing data driven, and that's where I think Marketo really gave the marketer a seat at the table
Sure.
to be able to do that. Sales, interestingly, has always had. I mean, if you think about it, after ERP, the next key application probably was CRM. Back in the late 70s, as systems came on, like of basically all it was a Rolodex, but then it, grew to be forecasting, and then it became systems like Siebel and the Salesforce and HubSpot and things like that. And so there's been tools available for the sales rep, but it's been very unstructured. And as we were saying, it doesn't take a lot of certifications and skill set just to raise your hand to be a sales rep. There's a lot of kids like me that went to ASU or to Chico State that God bless us. We come out of school and we say, I'm going to go sell something. And we dive in. And so as you think about the future of that, I think it's very easy to visualize that we are going to apply more rigor to the craft of selling, meaning that we are going to start having people go through training programs. I mean, everybody's familiar with MEDDIC or the Challenger sale or Sandler training, these methodologies. That's a great first start, but it's not like it's necessary for you to become a sales rep to go through that. It just happens to be that if it's on your LinkedIn, you're probably more valuable to me because you've at least been taught a discipline. So from a future perspective at a rep level, I think there's going to be a lot of things there. And then secondly, a topic, Pete, you and I always talk about is your sales manager. Think about your typical sales manager. They're probably promoted from within. Somewhere they had to get that shot. And think about any sales training enablement that you've probably built is for your SDRs, for your sales reps, for your sales engineers, and it certainly ain't for your sales manager. And so that person is put on Mount Everest with a parka and an ice pick. It's hard.
Figure it out.
So I'll give it to you, Pete, to get your ideas. But like, I just visualize that there's going to be, I love the word rigor. There's going to be more rigor, methodology, more skill set transfer that happens into both the selling profession as well as the sales management profession.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. And it's like funny. It's funny that you say the thing about like MedPick, right? And kind of like when you think about how you like sell like a new way of being in the world to a client, it's like, here's your current state, here's your future state, here's the negative consequences associated with like, the of like not making this change. Here's this, here's the positive benefit associated with that. Okay, in order to achieve that positive benefit and like impact this metric in this way, what are the required capabilities? What are the required capabilities of a marketing automation platform or an ERP or like a whatever, right? And I think that like those required capabilities are like totally undefined right now for sales management.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's just like, it's like the cosmetologist thing. I'm going to steal the hell out of that. Do you know how do you actually know how to become a sales leader? You actually just put it on your LinkedIn profile. Congratulations, you're a sales leader. Right. Versus like, hey, like there's an actual craft here. And I think the way that we think about this is that there's a set of capabilities that as a manager you should be able to do. It's kind of like there's like football moves and then there's like manager moves. And like obviously managers, because you come from being a rep, like ain't no problem around like deal inspection and like deal strategy and stuff like that, like it's essentially, if you came from that, like that's always gonna be what you're falling back to. But it turns out that there's a bunch of other things that you need to be paying attention to and spending your time on. And that means like, hey, look, there's deal inspection meetings, right? And like forecast calls and things like that. And then there's like coaching meetings, right? Database, or what we call like database one-on-ones, where like the purpose of that is like, hey, we've identified this thing that's a hitch in your giddy up, right? Bill's a big golfer, so like I always like to use like golf swings as a metaphor. Like, hey, this is the thing that we're working on your golf swing right now, and we're tracking it with respect to this metric right here, whether it's a win rate or, hey, we're trying to get your ASP up, we're trying to get your conversion rate out of disco up, we're trying to get your activity up, we're trying to get your pipe hygiene, like your number of untouched ops down. And so having those one-on-ones where it's just like, hey, we're going to have this meeting for a half hour every week or maybe every 2 weeks or whatever, and like we're going to have accountability on. This is actually something that that Corey and Hillman talk about a lot in 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach, is essentially having that continuous cadence of execution there. And so the and so that's that's something that people are gonna end up getting better and better at over time, kind of realizing what these required capabilities are, and like doing better around that. I think the other thing is that folks are really going to have to get better at kind of like identifying what the hitch in the giddy up is, right? Like looking at the swing. That doesn't mean like being on the call and saying like, oh, okay, cool, you talk too much here, or like you need to ask a second level disco question. That's great, but then there's a level above that as well, which is across a rep's entire behavior, right? Because like you can't just like be on a call, you got 8 reps or whatever, relying on finding the hitches in the calls is just like, that's not a very data-driven way of doing it. It's just not very high leverage. And there's a number of others as well. Bill,
Yeah,
any
Pete,
other kind of like thoughts on future state?
Yeah, to add to that, I think this is really important. And when I try to join things like this, I try to make very actionable level takeaways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this first bullet point here is really important, is that deal inspection and those types of meetings are very different than what coaching is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to interchange those. I totally get it. But if you think about this, if every week your existence as a rep is, I go to meet with my boss for my one-on-one, and all I do is talk about breaking down my deals, where's the coaching? Like you said, where's fixing the swing hitch in that? No, we're just breaking down the deals about how we get things over the line. And so think about that experience. If you're a sales leader and you're on this call today, like what that experience must be for your sales reps. Are they learning? Is their learning curve up and to the right? Are they mentally stimulated? And Pete, I know you've heard this story, but I had a sales manager, classic story, had been in the company for a number of years, really successful sales rep. Yep. So therefore that obviously makes them, ripe to be a great sales leader. So we moved him into the sales leadership role, and very quickly his team was not making the number. And I think you'll recall, Pete, because I think I've shared this one with you. A bunch of us swarmed the problem. We wanted to go help him, and we tried applying as much data as we could get. His boss was paying attention to, like his deal inspection, what that looked like. My boss, the CEO, actually listened to his gong calls to hear what he was doing, what he wasn't doing, and gave me feedback that I could help go share with him. And where I specifically went to was, we had just gone through the process of rolling out a sales methodology. And I asked him on a 1 to 10 scale, where do you think you are on applying our methodology? And he said, I'm about a 6. And I said, I think you are too. And I said, let's think about your legacy as a sales leader. Is someone going to come in that works for you and say that you were really great at helping them get deals done? Maybe. That's probably what sales managers do as part of their job. But is this person going to say that you were great at growing them? And he was like, no, I'm not. And I'm like, look, in absence of any more data than this, let me tell you what our CEO listened to on your gong call, because you might want to think about some pointers here. Maybe if you went to a 9 or a 10 on applying these principles of the methodology, you might actually start teaching your sales team how to fish, as opposed to you jumping on the sales calls and being the superpower close all those things. And it took a couple quarters, but we saw success from him and him step over the line from missing to making his quota. And so to me, that was really a light bulb where I said, data at some level, right? Because not everybody, Pete, has Atrium and has these data points being, presented to them in a proactive way on a daily basis. And so I was trying to look for how can I, like we've all had that crappy sales manager who's like, you just got to go run through the tackle. You got to go run through the wall and get this deal done. It's like, okay, that's great. Maybe you do that and maybe you pull the choke out and like you run at full steam at 110%. But there's only so many times you can do that before you finally come back to the point of you're like, I'm just a deal jockey. All I want to do is grow myself into some other thing. And so that's why I think this first bullet point, deal inspection, is certainly a part of your role as a sales leader, but also is growing your people. That's your true legacy. And so balancing that out and how you think about setting up your sessions with your team, whether it's a forecast call, whether it's a one-on-one, and having that balance there is critical. And that's why, as you stated, Pete, I'm a fan of sales coaching.
Yeah. And actually I think I accidentally skipped over this this slide just a second ago. I think we were just talking about this like magical vision of the future and what it ought to look like. I think it's kind of worthwhile to talk about like where some of the pathologies are right now in terms of the behaviors that organizations do that kind of like, that make them like kind of put them behind the 8 ball a little bit there. And so when I think about kind of like what the current state is here, I think there's a couple of kind of problems that organizations have. One is, I think, Bill, you kind of mentioned this earlier. How are you enabling your sales managers? And usually the answer to that is what? And the reason why, like, I get it, right? Like if you're a Series B startup or a Series C startup or whatever, like maybe that's the point at which you get a sales enablement hire. And so of course, like what's the first thing that like he or she is going to be working on? Well, it's probably going to be like rep onboarding, like getting the rep, like the ramp camp all dialed in, because like to date, it's probably been like a complete like forest of like, of Google Docs and like, or maybe if you're lucky, right? And so that's actually one of the things that Michelle Vazana talks about quite a bit in her book here is how the more you can invest in managers, the better off that you actually are, because it's like a coach the coaching sort of situation, right? And so now what you get is you get leverage. And this is actually something that we do at Atrium is because like, we make this software that helps sales managers and SDR managers, whatever you use, data to improve performance. Cool, but what happens if like the software is telling you this thing that this rep has like a really bad pipeline hygiene problem based on the fact that they've got like a bajillion untouched ops, but then as a manager you're afraid because you were promoted 6 months ago or like 12 months ago or whatever, you're afraid of having a critical, constructive criticism conversation. Well, like all the data in the world isn't really super helpful if that person can't navigate that conversation. And so that's why, like, so what our solution for that, we don't say like, okay, and our CSMs are going to teach you actually how to manage as well. It's like, good luck. We don't have that capability yet. So what we do is we actually contract with Richard Harris, who's this amazing sales trainer, to do monthly boot camps for all of our customers for their sales managers, because we know that their organizations are not doing sales manager enablement internally. Bill, what are some of the other kind of like defects that you see in organizations around kind of like how they kind of get in their own way with respect to sales coaching?
I really love this last bullet point about it's all about deal inspection until you miss quota. It's like the Mike Tyson-ism of everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, and then everything goes out the window. Like I mentioned, I spent the first 15 years of my career in big companies. And the nice thing about doing that was I had a lot of frameworks invested in me. And I guess frameworks is just a kind of like a high cotton way of saying expectations are clear of how you're going to think through things. And like Pete, you and I share a common amigo in Brett Queener. I believe he's a investor in your organization. He was an investor and a board member at Pendo. So I had the fortune of being able to work with him. And, when I think about current state here, I'll give you a baseline of, and this is all, give full credit to Brett for this because he really helped inject this thought into me. But a great baseline, if you're struggling with how you think about coaching and managing your team, is he always used to finish a quarter with us, and whether we made our quota or missed our quota, he would always challenge us to say, was it a pipeline issue that helped you get above quota or an execution issue that helped you get above or below quota? And really broke it down into a very binary level thing. And what was great is because, like, you sit there and you talk about, like, oh, the macroeconomic economy, people resigned, and, I lost firepower or quota power on the street and all this. And he just went, look, there's two reasons why you miss or make a quarter. It's you had enough pipeline at the beginning, and you go in and you know what your conversion rates are, your typical historical type of things. So did you go in with enough pipeline? If you didn't, then that means you're probably hustling to create pipeline that you can close in quarter, which may be hard if you're a company that has 90-day or plus sales cycles.
Exactly.
Or you're trying to go and expand current customers, because that tends to be an easier, faster sale. So if you don't have enough pipe, you kind of know your motion. And on the execution side is, did you close deals at your typical close rate? Did you have your typical win rate? And this is important data. Again, going back to the big D word here, it's important data that was a really simple framework or metaphor for me to use, because after we come out of a quarter, I'd go back, and typically the answer was a little bit of both. It wasn't like, oh, we totally botched the execution or we totally missed building pipe. But I could come back and I could say, look, we were at 88% of quota for the quarter. Why do we miss? Well, I contribute that, our close rates weren't at their traditional historical levels. That accounted for 6% of the miss. The other 6% was pipeline that we didn't come into. So as we caught this, we started thinking about the next quarter. We need to go in with that pipeline. Here's where we look today. So as I think about current state of coaching, I think that's a really elegant, simple framework to think about, because it lets you look backwards and also lets you use it as a forward-looking indicator to start predicting of, shoot, I know I don't have enough pipeline. Why am I over there forecasting the quota, right? Like, do I have that superpower to go and go single-handedly close these deals and scale the? No, you probably don't. So I really like that as someone that's looking at building their current state and start really trying to work from a framework perspective.
Yeah, and I think you nail something there about, like, the concept of, like, the forecast versus how to improve your forecast. Like, forecasting is, like, a really kind of confusing topic for a lot of people, because the funny thing is, like, these are things that are in the future, right? So, like, the deals are in the future. They're next month, they're the month after that, they're the month after that, etc. But the funny thing about them is that they're kind of like in the past, if you will, because, like, they were born in the past. Right, they were born a little bit like they were born a month ago or 2 months ago or whatever. And so to, like, tell your deal cycle is what your deal cycle is, kind of is, right? And so it's kind of like you have this, like, forecast situation, and to tell yourself a story like, oh, we're going to be light, or it looks like we're going to be light. Can we pull some of those things forward? How? Like, guess what? Like, if you knew how to do that, you would always do it. Right? It's not like, oh, guess what? Like, there's a boo-boo. Now we can, like, Bill's going to put on his Superman cape, and he's going to pull some of these things forward. And so this is why the important thing to do is to say, how can we improve our forecast? And that either means, hey, can we raise our win rates, right? Can we raise our close rates or whatever? One. And the mechanism by which we do that is, it's not like there's a concept, this overarching concept of, like, your organization-wide close rate or whatever. Your organization is full of humans. They're full of reps, and the reps are the ones that close the business. So, like, when you have a blended close rate, like, say you're like, oh, okay, we're at an 18% close rate or whatever, and we want to be at a 20% close rate. It's not like every single rep is at 18%. You've got some reps that are at 10%. You've got some reps that are at 25%. And so what we got to do is we got to tackle those 10% kids and be like, cool, where's the hitch in your giddy up? Because, like, you're out of band. And so that's where the data-driven management piece comes in, is to, like, diagnose and be like, cool, these are our problem children right here for these specific reasons. We're going to raise your performance. And that's the way that you raise a close rate from 18% to 20%, it's 22%. It's not to get your existing, like your top performance from 25 to 30. Like at a certain point, like there's no more juice in that, there's no more juice in that lime, right? So
100%.
people need to think about, how do I improve the forecast, right? And the mechanism by which you do that is by like seeing where the shortfalls are and fixing that on a rep by rep or a team by team basis.
Pete, but I think you just nailed the entire essence of this conversation. Is 18% close rate is an average. And like you said, if you have 10 reps, there's somebody down around 6-7%, and there's someone around 25-28%.
Exactly.
And what you just did was you just took an average that a lot of people would stop there and say, well, hey boss, I need to get 18 to 20. And you gave the how-to. This is going back to my Mount Everest analogy.
Right.
You know, I always used to say to my sales managers, I'm not that proficient in the kitchen. Like I'm not a baker, but if you put me in a kitchen with salt and flour and water and said, make cupcakes, I don't know what's going to happen. But if you gave me some simple instruction that said, look, turn on the oven to 425, pull out this pan, you know, mix the salt or the flour and the sugar with, like, you might get something that's not that pretty, but I'll bet you it tastes a little bit like a cupcake, right? And that's the kind of coaching that I think, like when we think about the future of coaching that we're moving towards, which isn't just, you know, I'm the boss, you're my sales manager underneath me, and I say, look, your close rate is 18%. Hey, buddy, get it to 20%. It's 18%.
Gee, thanks, Bill.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to try and help you out and give you that recipe. I took a look, and across your team, here are your 10 reps. These 5 are all sub 18%. If we all brought them up by 1%, the compounding effect takes us up to 20% close rate, right? You just gave that manager something actionable to work with as they go work with their team, as opposed to just this like very generic advice, like, hey, you need to increase your close rate.
Yeah, I think that just kind of goes to this notion of like giving your managers something, like giving them a framework of which to, like, those required capabilities of like what they ought to be doing, right? Like these are the things you ought to be doing. And so what we just talked about was like issue identification. Hey, here's your 10 reps. These are the 4 that are under the bar with respect to win rate as compared to their other peers or the other, 20 mid-market reps in the team. Let's go ahead and fix these. And then the flip side is like the cool thing about reps is that, and I like people in general, is that like they're creative, right? One of my buddies who's a partner at Craft Ventures, is an investor in Atrium, calls them truffle pigs. Or like a truffle pig, like goes and like kind of sniffs things out, like, ooh, something smells good over here, right? So you get these reps who like, they do creative stuff. They're like, oh man, I think I can do this in order to like get this deal closed or maybe enlarge this deal or whatever. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna start seeing like on your team, you're gonna have some truffle pigs, and they're gonna like sniff things out. And then what will happen is those behaviors, like the behaviors that create the better outcomes, start showing up in the data. It's not, and I was talking to the CRO of Hired earlier. She's an Atrium customer. We were talking about this. She's like, I've got these 3 reps who are just like hitting the cover off the ball. And like she was like talking with their Atrium CSM. She's like, it's super obvious from their behavior exactly what it is that drives their outperformance. And like literally we're just going to the underperformers and like, hey guys, here's the sitch. Like, I know that you say the leads are weak. They're not weak. Like, here's the data here. And we're going to get you to behave like Bobby and Susie and Frankie over here. And like, by the way, here's the fingerprint of their success. And so we call that standardizing success of top performers. It's another thing as a coach you got to be doing, right? Because versus just being like, okay, guys, like close harder. Like that doesn't work.
1000%. I mean, I always say this, winning is infectious. And so if someone starts seeing someone winning, they start saying, wait, what are they doing? Like I remember at Marketo, we had this rep that came in and we had just launched a new product. He was onboarding. And of course, when you're onboarding and you're teaching him why this is the best product, here's the value proposition, now go sell it. And you know what he did? He came in and sold it. And all of a sudden at the end of the quarter, he had sold 5 of these add-on products that no one else in the organization had sold. And they all
he didn't know any better. He didn't know any better. Exactly. He didn't know it couldn't be done.
He had no blockers in front of him to say I shouldn't sell this, and all the other people were creating the same thing that you were saying, that the leads are weak. No, it's just
man, the product's bad, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so everybody took note of that guy and was like, okay, wait, if brand new guy can sell, I can certainly go sell. One thing tactical for the audience here, Pete, that like I said, I always love to leave takeaways with. Mark Roberge, who was the head of sales at HubSpot.
He's awesome.
He and I think very similar. We both were in marketing automation for a long time, so maybe that helped drive it. But he's a big believer of forward-looking KPIs, and I'm a big fan of that too. One thing along this conversation that may help a lot of our audience is a thing that some friends of mine have started calling the bench metric.
God.
Proud to say that they've named it after me, which is cool. But what it is this. A common question that I ask sales managers when they're interviewing for a role is, tell me your desert island dashboards, right? Like, tell me your 2 or 3 things you have to see. The bench metric is my desert island dashboard. It's the one thing that if you forced me to say, Bill, what are you going to watch? Well, certainly I want to watch ARR because that's telling me my growth. Certainly I want to watch NRR because that tells me what I'm
lagging.
I want to look at cash, again, lagging. So this one is a forward-looking one. It's a little sophisticated, and Pete, you're probably going to sit there and nod your head and tell me that this is like a pre-built in Atrium. And unfortunately, in my operating days, Atrium really wasn't out there, so I never got to use it. But you're probably going to tell me it's already there. But this is the bench metric for my desert island one, or my favorite forward-looking one is I look at 6 elements. And the joke about this is I literally, I use my phone like a lot of people do as my alarm clock. So I would wake up to my alarm clock, and the first metric I would look at in bed was this metric. And sometimes my wife would wake up next to me and she'd be like, "What are you looking at?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm looking at the Desert Island metric, honey." So the metric is this. I like to look at on a daily basis. Now, daily is good for me as a sales leader. My CEO got wind of this one, and he was like, "Can we bring that to the weekly e-staff meeting?" And for a bigger team, it's there, but daily, it really gave me a pulse of where we were going. It's a pipeline metric. It's 3 things first. It's net new deals added. So yesterday I had 0. Today I have 20K. That's 20K of a net new deal. Plus deals expanded. So yesterday I had a 20K deal. Today it's 30K. So I have plus 10K. Plus deals pulled forward. So something that was sitting in Q3 is now sitting in Q2. So that's all in a parentheses, those 3 metrics. Now there's a minus sign, and now there's another 3 metrics, and you can kind of see where this goes. It's deals
pushed
killed.
out.
Deals killed first, deals shrunk second, and deals pushed out third. So those 3 plus, or those 3 together minus those 3, and literally some days that thing's negative, and it scares me to death.
Everyone's puckering.
Yeah, I'd have it run at midnight. So I'd wake up in the morning and I'd see from the day before what it was. And what I would do is watch it on a daily basis. If I saw like 3 days into the week as a sales leader and a coach that aspired to use data to help my team, I would send a note to my leadership and call a meeting together and say, "Team, we're 3 days negative in a row." Now, Pete, it's one thing if it's the first day of a new quarter, because we know what happens then. There's this thrash.
We got a pattern. We got a leaky boat here.
Yeah, but if it's May 25th and I'm in the middle of my quarter and I see 3 days of negative pipeline growth, that's a leading indicator that something's not good. Because going back to the queenerism of you got to have the pipeline or you got to have the execution, I know that I've got to be creating pipeline at a certain rate to get my coverage for this quarter and for next quarter. So that metric, I think, is a really helpful one of trying to apply some data. It's great for the top sales leader to look at and either apply to their reps, or if they have sales managers, to their sales management team, to be able to guide them that guys were trending well or were not trending well.
I love it. So it's for a human or a team. So this is a big thing, is that like an organization is just like a composite of a bunch of teams. Teams are a composite of a bunch of humans. So on a human basis, on a team basis, on an organization basis, it's new pipe born, right? Came in from SDR, came in from whatever. It's pipe expanded, got bigger, right? And then pipe pulled in, minus deals closed, like, right? And we closed one or closed lost, because unfortunately the nice thing about close one is that you close one. The downside associated with close one is that it's no longer in the pipeline. You got to replace it, right? Exactly. Deals closed out, won or lost, shrunk, or pushed out, because that way you get this. I like it. I think we need a fancier name than the bench metric. I like the
Yeah,
bench
we need
metric,
something
but like
cooler. That doesn't
we got to
roll off
brand,
the
we got to
tongue.
brand it. It's got to be like, Dynamo or something. Who knows?
I don't know.
I think
In the chat list here, Laura and Chico just asked, "Can we repeat it?" And Pete, you just repeat it. Maybe it should be
Oh
the
yeah,
Chico formula or something like that. It's kind of a cooler name than the bench formula.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, I think leading indicators are super, super, super important. One place where leading indicators are, of course, like astronomically critical is in the new, like the ramp of a new rep, right? Or new reps, because unfortunately you don't have any of those lagging indicators. And this is like more and more and more critical the longer your deal cycle is. In fact, we actually have a master class on data-driven ramp monitoring and management, which is I actually love it. It's one of my favorite master classes that I give, because ramp is just like another great example of something that like gets people's like brains all twisted up. And so I think that like leading indicators and ramp just end up being extraordinarily important, again, from a coaching standpoint, because like the purpose of this stuff is not to like watch it and be like, oh, okay, well, that's cool that those numbers are going like this. It's like, no, we like intervene. We like jump on the June bug, like, jump on the grenade and throw it out of the bunker. And so, paying attention to leading indicators and ramp ends up being extremely important. It's like, hey, how many new ops are being added to this reps pipeline? How are those ops advancing? Right? Are they getting to Disco Plus? Are they getting to stage 3? Are they getting to proposal? Because the way that a lot of organizations end up kind of like instrumenting ramp is to say like, oh, hey, I mean, we have this in our discovery calls. We'll be like, hey, like, how do you go about like measuring the health of how do you go about measuring the health of new reps in ramp? And people will be like, oh, we wait for, we have an expectation that they get to full productivity in like month 7 or like, month 6 or month 7. It's like, oh, well, like, how do you know they're pacing towards that? And so usually what ends up happening is like, there's critical moments in your sales motion which are usually encoded in stages. Generally, not always, but like usually encoded in stages. So like, maybe it's trials started or proposals sent, like those are, and then there's obviously like new ops that are coming into pipe. And then there's, ops that actually get to Disco Plus or what have you. And then there's the same stuff with like activity as well. Like you can have a bunch of ops that are coming into a rep's pipe, but if like their meeting volume isn't coming up either, or like their opportunity touch volume isn't coming up, then like are these like, is an op that's not being worked, does it actually count? Because like, I don't know, I mean, maybe I'm just a bad sales rep, but like I don't remember any deals that I ever closed that I didn't like have meetings with op or touch it. And so those are some of the big things that I kind of think about from a leading indicator standpoint in ramp there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, you were going to add something, Bill?
Yeah, just before you go there, both at Pendo and Marketo, we prescribe to this, and it's again a leading indicator metric. Is we and this will, like, just don't go with my numbers, just go along with kind of the gag that I'm talking about here. But what we used to do was we would look at every sales rep's calendar Monday morning at 8 o'clock, and we would look to see how many meetings they had for the week scheduled at that point. And that could be a qual meeting, it could be a demo meeting, it could be a price delivery meeting, a value creation meeting, any meeting, because the fact is anything you have on Monday at 8 o'clock is going to multiply. Because if you have a qual call, it's going to turn into a demo. A demo is going to turn into a price call. And the reason we watched it was we could start seeing our reps that were making the numbers that were what we called above the line had this many meetings at the start of the week. The reps that didn't have that many meetings weren't making their quota. And the reason we thought about this was a really interesting thing. Like in a lot of interviews, you get asked the question by your candidates, tell me what a successful rep sounds like. And here's how most of those answers go. They're the least data-driven answer ever. Oh, our reps have grit. They have killer work ethic. Like it's the lamest answer, quite frankly, ever. It doesn't do anything for helping the candidate that's interviewing with you understand how they're going to make their numbers. And we realized we're getting asked that question, and we're coming up flat. So that's when we started looking at these meetings. And what we would say is, hey, Pete, that's a great question. We actually track this. And what we see is our reps, and this is where I said, like, this is relevant to us, so don't apply that this rule is standard. But our reps have 9 meetings on Monday morning at 8 a.m. when they walk in the door, set up for the week, because those 9 are going to become 15 or 16 through the week.
Exactly.
People are in the 7 to 8 range. They sometimes hit, sometimes miss. The people that are less than 7 meetings, they miss their number. And so when you come on and start in the company, you're going to have whatever amount of time it is for training, 4 weeks, 6 weeks of onboarding. Then we're going to put you into your patch. And what we're going to look for is by the end of week 8, we're going to look for you to have 2 meetings on your calendar. By the end of week 10, 5 meetings on your calendar. By the end of week 12, like the 9 meetings. And that's what we're going to measure you to. And if you're not hitting that, we're going to point out that, look, data-wise, you're trailing behind what our top performers do. So it's another,
Exactly.
I think, if you're not doing that inside your business, it's not spying on your reps. You're literally trying to help them see for themselves. Like you said, when you gave the example of the 3 people that are smashing it, and you basically are going to the rest of the team that's not, and you're saying, we really want you to replicate these behaviors. That's what we're trying to do with that.
Yeah, I think that there's a really big cultural thing, and this is something that we deal with a lot at Atrium, is like the change management in organizations of helping them be more data driven. Like one component of that is helping the managers be more data driven. The other thing that's associated with that is helping the managers interface with the reps on that. And like this, I'm a big, like, I like to talk crap on like dashboards up on the walls. Like you walk through a sales floor and there's like big TVs and there's like metrics on it or whatever. Like nobody looks at them. It's like nonsense, right? It's like theater. Now the thing that it is good for, though, is it sends a signal to the organization, like, this matters. Now, the problem that organizations do is like they put it up, they put those up and they're like, congratulations, we're data driven. It's like, no, goofball. Like you need to have metrics in your, in your one-on-ones, in your team meetings. You need to have these assets that are like, broadcasting to your team, et cetera, et cetera. What that thing right there does is it gives you air cover to say, hey, in this organization, we take this seriously, and we're going to use it to improve your performance, and we're going to use it to hold you accountable. Right. And so it is like hilarious to see, in sales, you get a lot of people who are like sports fans, right? Either football or like baseball or like golf or whatever. And so like, if you think about how, the playoffs right now, basketball playoffs, the reason why the Golden State Warriors, like over the last 10 years, have just like run the table on the league and like had such an advanced, advantage, was because they got into analytics really, really early on and used it to change the behaviors of their team. Shoot more 3-pointers, get the ball to the 3-point shooters, step back, over the line, recruit more of those, those long range shooters, coach better on that. All of those things came from a core data insight. And so we all sit here being like, yay, Warriors, yay, yay, Red Sox or whatever. And then when it comes to like doing data driven coaching inside your organization, all of a sudden people are like, oh, that's like spying on reps. That's insane. It's absolutely nuts. Like, Tom Brady comes off the field. He immediately goes and he sits next to, back in the day, Bill Belichick, and like they're going through exactly what went down, right? Like coaching is something, like data-driven coaching is something that should be received, right?
They go into the room and watch the tape, right? I mean, look, I think the new batch of sales folks coming out, they're used to it because they have Gong, they have these incredible tools. It's more the change management, Pete, that we're talking about, of the old dogs like myself that are like, wait a second, someone's looking over my shoulder. I don't like that. So I think the new batch is getting it, that these tools are designed.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're totally right. Yeah, the new batch is getting it. And the good news is like we've got our Pelotons, we got our Whoops, right? We've got our Fitbits or whatever. So like people kind of get it. And I think in fairness, like back in the day, it was more of like an adversarial relationship of like, oh, you're using this data in order to like, spank me and what have you, versus like, no, man, this is like telemetry to make all of us like more successful. In fairness, back in the day, because it actually wasn't telemetry, it was like banging rocks together. I think you were kind of talking about this, like early CRM. Like early CRM was a Rolodex, and then it was an opportunity registration system. Oh, well, like, can you do any sort of like analytics on it? No. Right? Because the ops get submitted in there like 3 days before they could close one anyway. So we don't get any stage advancements or like any of that jazz as well. And plus all the deals that close loss, like they don't actually get put into the CRM anyway. So like our win rates are BS. Whereas now we have like hella data. And so now we can actually do telemetry, which benefits folks. So like, I mean, I kind of feel it, but on the flip side, I think that organizations that really embrace this and front and center, like the reason why we do this is to make you more like Tom Brady, more like Steph Curry, more like Klay Thompson, et cetera, the better off those organizations will be. And moreover, what you're going to have, like to the point about culture of winning, you see, like once you start getting these success stories internally, other reps see that. They're like, oh, this rep went from a 15% close rate to a 25% close rate because his conversion rate out of pilot jumped by 50% because he's actually following our mutual plan process now, whereas like before he was just running and gunning, right?
Yeah.
Wow, I guess I should follow our mutual plan process as well and change and then moreover, it's not just, hey, I have that pathology, I'm going to fix myself as well. It's also like, gosh, I guess this data-driven coaching is really impactful for us. I should be receptive of it and like welcoming of it. And then you get other get other managers as well. Like, oh man, that manager over there is coaching with data. Man, they're going to get like promoted to VP before I am. Like, I better get on the train, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The I think one thing that I think that's on kind of like a lot of people's mind right now would be kind of like current economic environment, how that like modifies how you should be coaching, or kind of like what you need to do with your reps there. Do you have any? I mean, I imagine you're probably talking to a lot of your portfolio companies about this right now. Yeah, any sort of like perspective on that, Bill?
Yeah, 100%. I think anybody that was selling 2 years ago in March of 2020, we went through some similar things. We all went into the pandemic and we started batting down the hatches. We started thinking, number one, the advice that I've been sharing with our portfolio companies is a lot of CFOs in tough times, they go to you and say, I need you to stack rank your tech stack. And I need you to tell me what's above the line that's a must-have and what's below the line. Oh, sorry, there's the dog. So what's a must-have and what's a nice-to-have? And on the nice-to-have, they make you either look to get rid of it or to reconcile the contract, reduce users, that type of thing. And so my first advice to any sales leader is you should probably be working with product marketing right now to really be able to quantify the impact that your software has for your buyers, for your customers. I think that's just a critical thing that sales and marketing own right now. When you get to the other macroeconomic elements to it, obviously we've lived in a really great time period for the last couple of years where really high valuations, really high investment dollars. And now we're probably gonna go back to something that's a little bit more conservative, which means if you're spending $4 or $5 as a startup to make $1, that's kind of yesterday's model. The current model is probably going to be, I'm going to spend, $2 or $3 to make $1. And it means that you're going to have to be smarter about where you spend your money. It means that just because someone resigned or you terminated them, you don't automatically go replace them. You go figure out, do I need to replace them? You need to be crafty about that type of thing. So, I mean, like I said, I'm not on the investment side of battery. So, I'm still learning that element here, but as a classic operator, I think about first things first. First principles are I have to justify my existence inside of a company, why it's important that you have me, and if I'm successful at that, then I've got to think about how I'm running my internal organization. So those two elements jump to my mind.
Yeah, I think the thing I would add to that is now that you've got a situation where we're not just like add more reps, like whatever it is. And now maybe in an organization where you might say, hey, we're going to pump the brakes on some sales hiring or whatever. Now we got to get all of our reps to like full productivity, right? That means like, it's not, oh, okay, this person's close rates are at 15% or whatever. Like, great, let's just add 3 more reps. It's like, no, man, we're not going to add, like, you can't be inefficient anymore. We need everyone to be at 25%. That means first identifying who's not at 25%. And then secondarily, for those folks that are low, how are they not at 25%? Where are the issues? Like, where are their conversion rate issues? The joke that we like to say is that every op is sacred, right? Like when you're doing your pipeline inspection and you're making sure that people are on top of their stuff from a pipeline hygiene standpoint, hey man, the days of like 15 ops, like sitting your pipe untouched 30 days, like marketing already hated you for that. Guess what? Like now they really hate you for that. And if you're not gonna be on top of your ops, we're just gonna redirect that op inflow to other folks, right? And so
Yep,
I think that like what you're gonna see is a rise of efficiency. But again, it's still just data-driven coaching, just with a different kind of like cant to it around like efficiency and what have you. And so I think the big thing on all of this is just it's extremely important for managers to say, hey, we can't just add more bodies, right? Like that time is probably coming to an end. Instead, we got to get the most out of our people.
Yes.
And so what that means is like being a great manager, making sure to coach, making sure to identify issues and fix those. And so again, if folks want a copy of 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach, crushing quota, and a cool little Yeti, we're going to drop the link here to sign up in the chat. But otherwise, I think we're at time here. Is that right, Angelica?
That is correct. I've just added the link again in the chat, so please sign up and get your Yeti and your books. It's awesome. And Pete and Bill, thanks for providing this great content, and Atrium and Battery Ventures for sponsoring. Thank you everyone for attending today's session. The recording and key takeaways along with the slide deck will be available on our site today. Have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you at the next event.
Be well.
Cool.